Hey y'all, it's Miss Flores. So today we're going to continue adding and subtracting fractions. We're just reviewing some problems real quick before we get started on today's assignment, just so that we can review what we started learning before Thanksgiving break. So let's go ahead and start with our first problem. So our first problem, we have 3/5 plus 9/10. So remember, our first steps when we're adding and subtracting fractions is we need to make sure that they have the same denominator. 5 and 10 are not the same number, so my very first step is listing the multiples of 5 and 10 to find their least common denominator, to find the first multiple that they share. So we're going to write multiples for 5 and 10. 5 would be 5, 10, 15, 20. 10 would be 10, 20, 30, 40. So looking at that, I can see that they both have 10 in common. So since 9/10 already has a denominator of 10, it can stay the same. The only thing that needs to change is my 3/5. I need to change 3/5 into tenths. So I need to think about, what did I do to 5 to turn it into 10? Well, I know 5 times 2 is 10, right? So we're going to do 3 times 2 to get our new numerator, because whatever we do to the bottom, we have to do the top in order to keep it equivalent. So do 3 times 2 to get my new numerator, which is 6. So now my problem ends up being 6/10 plus 9/10. And now I can just add my numerators. So 6 plus 9 is 15. And I end up with 15/10. Now, this looks great, but we can still simplify this a couple of different ways, right? I know that 15 and 10 are both multiples of 5, right? So I can simplify them by both dividing both of my numbers by 5. 15 divided by 5 is 3. 10 divided by 5 is 2. But now, my fraction is still an improper fraction. When we're simplifying, we want to make sure that we are simplifying it as most as we can, and that includes turning a mixed number, an improper fraction back to a mixed number. We're pulling out that whole number. So we did this a little while ago, right? Where we were turning improper fractions into mixed numbers, and we can do this by dividing. So remember, if I've got 3 halves, I can do numerator divided by denominator. So 3 divided by 2 in order to pull out the parts. So I can do 3 divided by 2. Well, 2 goes into 3 one time. 1 times 2 is 2. I subtract and I get 1. So remember, these parts, these numbers became my pieces of my mixed number, right? However many whole times it went into is my whole number. My remainder is my new numerator, and my denominator stayed the same, which was 2. So my final answer is going to be 1 and 1/2. So when we added, we got 15/10. When we simplified it all the way, it simplified down to 1 and 1/2. Let's look at our next problem. So our next problem, we've got 1/2 minus 2/5. So now we are subtracting. So just like before, we cannot subtract because they've got different denominators. So my very first step is listing my multiples. We're going to list the multiples of 2 and 5. So we're going to skip count by both. So 2 would be 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. 5 is 5, 10, 15, 20, 25. So looking at those lists, I can see that the first one that they share is 10. So since neither of these are tenths, we've got to turn them both into new fractions, right? So we got to turn 1/2 into tenths. We've also got to turn 2/5 into tenths. Well, I know from math facts that 2 times 5 is what gets me 10, right? So since I did that to the bottom, I got to do the same thing to the top. So I'll do 1 times 5 to get my new numerator. 1 times 5 is 5, so I end up with 1/2 equaling 5/10. And then same thing with 2/5. 5 times 2 is 10, so I'll have to do 2 times 2 to get my new numerator. 2 times 2 is 4. So I can just plug my new fractions into my old fraction spot. So instead of it being 1/2 minus 2/5, I'll now have it be 5/10, because 1/2 was equal to 5/10, minus 4/10, because 2/5 was equal to 4/10. And now I can solve this problem. 5 minus 4 is 1. My denominator stays 10, so my answer is 1/10. 1/10 is as simplified as it can get because it has a 1 in my numerator, right? Since it's got a 1 as my numerator, 1 can only be divided by 1. Divided by 1 doesn't simplify anything, so 1/10 is my final answer. Let's look at another addition problem. We've got 1/3 plus 4/10. So they do not have the same denominator, so first up is multiples. We're going to list the multiples of 3 and 10. Well, 3 is going to be 3, 6, 9, 12, 15, 18. 10 is 10, 20, 30, 40, 50. I don't see any shared multiples yet, so we're going to have to keep going with our list of 3 because our list for 10 is getting with some pretty big numbers. So after 18, my next one would be 21, 24, 27, and then I get 30. 30 is going to be the first multiple that 3 and 10 share. Since neither one of them is 30 already, we're going to have to convert both of them to 30ths. So we're going to turn 1/3 into 30ths, and we're going to turn 4/10 into 30ths. So to get to 3 to 30, I had to multiply it by 10. So I'll do the same thing to my numerator. So I end up with 1 times 10, which is 10. So 1/3 is equal to 10 30ths. Now same thing to 10 to go to 30. To go from 10 to 30, I have to multiply by 3. So I have to do 4 times 3 to get my new numerator, which is 12. So now I end up with my new problem. I'm going to plug in my new fractions into my old fraction spots. Instead of it being 1/3 plus 4/10, it's now going to be 10 30ths plus 12 30ths. And now I can solve this problem. Well, 10 plus 12 is 22. And my denominator was 30. So my answer is 22 30ths. Now, can 22 30ths be simplified? Yeah, right? They're both even numbers. So since they are both even, I can divide both of them by 2. I can divide 22 by 2. I can also divide 30 by 2. When I do 22 divided by 2, I get 11. When I do 30 divided by 2, I get 15. So my simplified final answer is 11 15ths. I know 11 15ths is as simplified as it can get because 11 is prime. And since 15 isn't a multiple of 11, that is as simplified as it can get. So 1/3 plus 4/10, when we turned into our new fractions, found equivalent fractions with a common denominator, got me 22 30ths, which simplified to 11 15ths. Let's look at the next problem. We got a subtraction problem. We've got 3/4 minus 1/5. So y'all could look at it and guess it. We can't we can't solve it this way, right? Because they don't have the same denominator, right? So what's our first step? Multiples. So we're going to skip count by 4, skip count by 5 to find their least common denominator, the first multiple that they both share. 4 is going to be 4, 8, 12, 16, 20. 5 is 5, 10, 15, 20, 25. Well, I can see that they both share 20, right? So I need to turn both of these fractions into 20ths. So I'm going to turn 3/4 into 20ths, and I'm going to turn 1/5 into 20ths. And now we can find our equivalent fractions. Well, to go from 4 to 20, I have to multiply by 5. So I'll do 3 times 5 to get my new numerator. 3 times 5 is 15. To go from 5 to 20, 5 times 4 is 20, right? So to keep it equivalent, I got to do 1 times 4 to get my new numerator, 1 times 4 is 4. Now I've got my new equivalent fractions with a common denominator that I can plug back in to their original fraction spots, and we can solve. So instead of it being 3/4 minus 1/5, it will now be 15/20 minus 4/20. And now that's a problem that we can solve, right? We'll do 15 minus 4, which is 11. Our denominator was 20. And that is my final answer, is 11/20. We know 11/20 is as simplified as it can get because 11 is prime. 20 is not a multiple of 11. I can't do 20 divided by 11 and get a whole nice, clean, no remainder number. So 11/20 is as simplified as it can get. All right, last problem before we discuss our assignment for today. We've got 1/2 plus 2/3. So we are adding, we can't add them like this though because they don't have the same denominator. So let's find that denominator by listing our multiples. We're going to list our multiples for 2 and 3. Figure out what's the first multiple they both share. 2 is going to be 2, 4, 6, 8. 3 would be 3, 6, 9, 12. Well, looking at that, I can see that they both share 6. So they can both become sixths. So let's find their equivalent fractions as 6. So 1/2 is being turned into sixths, and 2/3 is being turned into sixths. Well, to go from 2 to 6, I know I multiply by 3. So I gotta do the same thing to my numerator. So I'll do 1 times 3, which is 3. So 1/2 is equal to 3/6. And we'll do the same thing to our 2/3. 3 times 2 gets me 6, so I'll do 2 times 2 to get my new numerator, which is 4. Now I plug those in to their old spots. So instead of it being 1/2 plus 2/3, it's now 3/6 plus 4/6. And now I can add. Well, 3 plus 4 is 7. And our denominator was 6. So my answer is 7/6. Now, so 7 is prime, right? So 7 can only be divided by 7. So I can't simplify by dividing them by a common factor, right? But it is an improper fraction. When we're dealing with improper fractions, that means we have to divide a different way. We've got to divide numerator by denominator to pull out our whole number. So let's just erase this spot real quick so we can divide. So with 7/6, that is numerator divided by denominator. So 7 divided by 6. So we'll do 7 divided by 6 to get our pieces for our mixed number. Well, 6 goes into 7 just once. 1 times 6 is 6. We subtract and get 1. So these pieces are our pieces to our mixed number. Since 6 went into 7 one whole time, that's my whole number. Our leftover, our remainder, is our new numerator, and our denominator was 6, so it's a 6. So this would be equal to 1 whole and 1/6 as my final answer. So 1/2 plus 2/3 was equal to 7/6. 7/6 as a mixed number is 1 and 1/6. Awesome job, y'all. Let's go ahead and take a look at our assignment for today. All right, y'all, here is your assignment for today. We have a Google form. So most of these questions are multiple choice where you have to solve adding and subtracting fraction problems. So number 1, you're finding what is the numerator of the sum, right? So you've got your addition problem and you're trying to figure out what is the numerator going to be when you solve this, right? You know your denominator is sixths, so you know that their least common denominator is going to be sixths, but you need to figure out what the numerator is. So the rest of these are all going to be kind of like some word problems. Remember, the way these are typed in is you've got this slash. That slash is your fraction bar. So number 5, it says add 2/3 plus 1/12. That's add 2/3 plus 1/12, right? This is just another way to write fractions. Same thing number 6. Subtract. That's going to be 1/4. Subtract 1/4 minus 1/8. And then you got to solve it. You've got word problems with fractions in there. Make sure you're paying attention to those. Your final question is going to be a short answer question. So you're going to have to type your answer in. When simplifying the expression below, what is the least common denominator you would use? So you're not even having to solve it. You're just having to find the least common denominator of these three fractions, right? So make sure you're listing the multiples of all three numbers and then finding the one that they share. Number 12, you're trying to figure out what problem this is solving. So remember, you've got the red is your original piece, and you are taking away this box. So what would that represent? We will go over whatever questions y'all want to when we meet a second time. And let me know if y'all need anything in the comments of the assignment, and I will talk to y'all soon. Have a great day, guys. Bye.